thanks for coming today. My name's Dan. I'm a software developer, but not in the games industry. Work in the big data, machine learning space, mostly focused on like backend, infrastructure, that kind of stuff. But the reason I'm talking to you today is I just really like games, and occasionally I will make card games and board games for friends. So more of a hobbyist and an enthusiast than a professional. But yeah, but I'm just a huge fan of the FIG. I've been coming for many years. So yeah, super excited to be able to talk to you guys today. And so one of the things I really like about the FIG talks is just the diversity in the like types of talks there are. Just this morning, right? If you were in the purple room, you saw, talking about like really big topics. This talk is not about a big topic. This is really about like a very like practical. This is like a very practical, like, hey, here's a tool, here's how you use it, kind of talk. And I love that we have a space here that we can explore both, right? And so this talk is just really based on like my experiences as a hobbyist making some games. So yeah, if there's any like technical issues, like if you guys haven't been able to hear me this whole time, please like interrupt me, like step on that Q&A square, because yeah, I'm not gonna be able to monitor the chat super well like during this. So yeah, please, you guys gotta let me know if something's going wrong. But yeah, and then last thing before we get going, like I'll have a link to these slides at the end. I'll try to post them in like the BFIG Discord, all that. So you guys can use it as a reference after the fact. So yeah, so why am I giving this talk, right? It's because you guys all have you guys all have great ideas for games, right? That's why you're here. You're all game makers, enthusiasts, hobbyists. And so, one of the things that I've learned in the few games that I've made is that it really takes a lot of time in play testing to like really get the balance right? Like you might have that great idea, but you really gotta get it out there. So the tool we're gonna go over today is just one of many that helps you like turn your ideas into something real, so you can get it out there. And so I'll tell you about one of the early games that I designed. So this was a lasagna themed set collection game with some hidden goals. So pretty ambitious idea. And I gave it this subtitle because I knew there were going to be problems with the game, right? Like, hey, designed it, printed out some cards, and just went for it, right? And in this case, there were some pretty big ones, right? I didn't put a limit on the number of cards you can play on any given turn. I didn't put a limit on the number of cards in your hand, and I put too many draw cards in the deck. So what ended up happening was one of the players managed to draw the entire deck of cards into his hand and sort of monopolize the game, which is certainly not what I intended, right? So that's how it earned its second title that you can see here, right? But I took this playtest and took this feedback, rewrote some of the rules, penciled in some fixes onto some of the cards, and did it again the next year, right? And then it worked more as like how I envisioned it working rather than how it actually worked, right? So this was a like super valuable lesson for me that like when making games, you got to like prepare for change, right? Because you're not going to get it right the first time. So, so for today, just wanted to talk to you about like some of the tools that help you in making cards, because lots of like tabletop games, they have cards. So we'll go over like the concept like behind the tools, some of the technical basics, that you need to know to use these particular tools, and then like how to actually get them out there like physically or digitally. So yeah, so I think I like to use examples. So let's think about like if you're like designing a card game, right? So if you're designing the Pokemon trading card game, let's put ourselves in that space. So there's lots of information that's like represented on this card, right? You've got like the pictures of the Pokemon, you've got the abilities, its health points, the what element it is, some like fun flavor text, right? So and like, hey, this being like the Pokemon game, right? There's quite a number of cards that you would have to make in order for this game to be successful, right? So if you think about like, hey, you're the designer of this card, and you go out, you do some play testing, and you find out, hey, like players are confused about where like the element is or where the HP is, and like you want to swap those two things. If you think about like, hey, like there's like at least 151 of these cards that you would have to update. So even if it like only took you like a minute to go like open up each Photoshop file or however you design this, right? Even if it only took you a minute, like that's still like over 2.5 hours to make like a small change like that, right? And so, we've got all the specifics here. So one of the ideas behind the tools we're going to talk about today is like taking the specifics out of the card and thinking about like, breaking down each card into like, it's just pure formatting, it's pure templating, right? So it's like, oh, here's like the structure of the card, right? It's, with all the specifics removed, and then applying the specifics later, right? So that way, if you need to make an update to the structure of the card, that doesn't affect, the actual contents of that card, right? So that's the big idea behind the tools we're going to talk about today. So the first tool, in fact, this is inspiration for like a lot of the tools out there, is this HTML and CSS card designer. So this is just open source project on GitHub, links down there. And so the idea is for the templating half of it, represent it in HTML and CSS, right? Like, because HTML and CSS are super expressive, right? Like, even just being here in GatherTown, right? This is all, it's obviously a lot of JavaScript, but, there's a lot of HTML and CSS that powers a website like this, right? It's super expressive, tons of stuff you can do. And, don't like walk out of the room yet. Like, I'm not a front-end developer. I don't know how to make websites, right? This is very, very approachable, HTML and CSS. I'm not a front-end developer either. So yeah, like you guys will be able to do this. So stick with me. Yeah, so it's about, getting that templating out there with, again, like these very, very common tools that tons of resources, you can learn about them. And then, having the card contents in a comma-separated values file, which is essentially like you can open up an Excel or Google Sheets, like it's a spreadsheet, right? So keeping your content separate from your template, and then combining that with image files to then render cards together. So yeah, so let's run through an example of like how you might use this. So for this example, I'm going to talk about a project, like a game mechanics project from undergrad. So this was a like battle royale dice battler. It was essentially like a modified Parcheesi board. And in this case, being in college, when it was time to make cards, I just cut up index cards and like wrote on the back of them, right? So there were 71 cards in total. And then a couple years ago, like I went through found the game, went through the process of digitizing it, to give to a friend who really liked it back in college. So yeah, so we're going to take this as our example where I wanted to, recreate these cards, but didn't want to, spend the time to cut up index cards and write them all out, hand write them out, right? So, these cards, they're pretty simple cards, right? They've just got the 3 fields. So we've got, some like what type of card it is, what the card does, and like when you can use it, right? So that's that limit section. So, able to represent that that template, able to take the different fields there, right? Like what type it is, what it does, and the limit, and like combine those two things together to come up with this like rendered card, right? So it's like, which nothing fancy here, right? Like this is like a pretty pretty basic card, but if I someday decided like, hey, the type needs to be here, like change the order, like this is very flexible, right? As I'm playtesting, as I'm building up the game. So so in terms of like the HTML part of it, this is all the HTML that there is for this example, right? Like I said, there's like 3 fields. You'll see that there's 3 div tags there, and each with like some curly braces of like a fill in the blank content that's going to come from that CSV file, right? So really like that's the extent that you need for text. The only other type of tag that you would probably make use of here would be the image tag, right? So if you want to include some pictures, yeah, and that ends up just being like path to a file. So very basic, but yeah, for today, this card is all text, just those 3 blocks. Now you know all the HTML that you need to know to use this tool, right? And then moving on to the CSS half of the templating. So this is like the primer for like, since like layouts are going to be really important in this case. So the idea being that, like, hey, you've got your content, right? So like whatever your text is going to be. And then CSS has this box model, right, where you have these transparent layers and these like visible layers, right? So the content is visible, the padding is transparent, the border is visible, the margin is transparent, right? So this allows you to like get the spacing like exactly right and precise for what you're trying to do, right? So, you know, plenty of materials out there, but this is really all you need to know to understand the CSS in this example. It'll be like fairly basic, right? So yeah, so this is the CSS for the entirety of the card itself, right? So in that top level, you know, containing the 3 div blocks. So, you know, this includes like your dimensions, I guess starting from the bottom up, right? Like there's your dimensions, there's how wide the card is, there's the height. You'll notice like, you know, if you're a web developer, like, you know, you're using like the units that like represent real units of measurement, which, you know, typically in web development, you're probably using pixels or points mostly. But, you know, in this case, you want to use real measurements because these might, you know, your destination might be like physically printing these and holding them. So yeah, and then, you know, we've got the 4 border attributes there. So really just about that, like that rounded black line around the card. So you can see that the color is black, the width of it, the radius is what gives it its like rounded corners. And, you know, the style is there to make it visible that you want it to be just a solid line around. And then the reason we have the margin there, if you remember from our box model, the margin is the space outward from the border. And that's because like, if you actually go and print this on paper, you want a little bit of space between your cards so that you can actually cut them, right? So, so that's it. So I know if I was watching this talk, that's probably where I would have tuned out. Certainly not an expert in CSS. So just wanted to like make you guys aware, like, hey, your browsers have like lots of great tools like embedded with them, right? So if you just like right click on a web page and click inspect, right, you can like get all this extra information. You can see like, oh, there's where the padding is. And, you know, you can open these things up and just play around with them, right? Like, it's not like, hey, you have to go in with all this information. You can just like toggle things on and off, add more fields, right? Like super accessible. Like here, I'm adding another field. So like changing like the alignment of the text at the top, saying like, hey, like where do we want this? You can, you know, go around and just change the order of the div blocks, right? Get it to how you like, and then, you know, go put it back into like your text files, right? But yeah, like tons of tools here, just built into the browser. I'm sure there's plenty of other development environments out there, but yeah, there's yeah, like all you really need is a browser to like really play around and understand this stuff. So yeah, be open to like experimentation, like look at how it gets laid out and just play around until it looks nice, right? So yeah, so we'll go over the rest of the CSS for this example. So here's a text. Here's a text example where, again, very similar to what we saw earlier, where, you know, we're giving it dimensions, and like we're just picking a font here, and then, you know, giving it some spacing so that it's not right up against the borders, right? Yeah, and then the description and the limit CSS super similar, but again, just giving it, like the only difference here is like we're giving a bit of a background so that like it better distinguishes itself from each section, right? So yeah, so not a ton of CSS knowledge needed here, all very approachable, yeah, all very easy to understand. But yeah, but that's it on the templating side. So with that, like you're ready to you know, use this tool, right? And now, like, now you shift over to using like the spreadsheet half of it, right? Which is, hey, just get your content in there, right? So like, for me, it was, going through the index cards, translating, like just typing it out, doing some data entry. And yeah, then I had everything I needed to actually start using this tool. So so this is what the tool actually looks like. It's just a pretty simple Java program, like not a lot of bells and whistles here. It's really, like, for the most part, like probably all you'll need to do is like click that open button, like navigate to your HTML file, and then it does the rest. It'll create like a generated file that looks like exactly what that web page was from the video that we were just looking at, right? So then you're ready to, then you're ready to print, right? Like you've built cards at this point. So and there's lots of resources out there to print, even if you don't have a printer, right? If you're a student, your school probably has printers. If you're working, your office probably has printers. The libraries typically have a printing program. Plenty of opportunities to get these things printed. And then just being on normal printer paper ends up being a little like flimsy, like certainly doable. One of the things I'll typically do is like put it into a sleeve and then like put another like playing card behind it. And this is like, and like gives a nice polish to the game. And so like for me, like I just went onto eBay and I found a lot of foreign language Magic cards for like $10. Like that made several games for me. It'll last you quite a while. And then like just looked on Amazon yesterday and you can get sleeves. I like the matted ones, personal preference. But yeah, like super like inexpensive to do here. You're probably spending less than $50 to put something like this together. So so like very, very approachable way to start building out these cards. But that's it. Now you have print to play, and like here's an example, just like of like what these look like. This one's from a different game. I've given the original game away, but we'll talk more about this example later. But yeah, that is it on the print and play side. So then on the digital side, so like HTML pages, great for like, hey, making a PDF, and making a PDF or just clicking print in your browser. For digital platforms, typically easier to work with images. And for this one, I like this other tool called CardPen. And so it's the same idea, in fact, inspired by the other tool. But here's a more web-based version with like a few extra features. And so the feature we're interested in here is, it'll render these into images rather than just like an HTML page. So so it works pretty much the same, right? Like you see the 3 sections there. You've got a section for your cards, like so that's where you put your CSV. You've got a section for your styles. That's where you paste your CSS. And a section for your template. And there's a lot of features here. Like there's like an editor view, and you can kind of visualize like what a lot of those like margins, borders, and things look like. So some pretty neat stuff in here if you want to play around with it. And then the other thing like I have highlighted here is like having the view in the advanced view like gives you also access to like make sure that your like card size matches up with what you were expecting. So like make sure that matches up with like your card dimensions. But then after that, like just clicking the images button, will give you a nice button there to download the images, and then it'll give you a zip file of all of your cards, right? So so now you're ready to like for publishing this for like digital platforms. So so we'll go through an example of getting this into Tabletop Simulator. Again, another inexpensive option. It's often on sale for about like $10, and gives you an access to lots of tools, and especially if it's not strictly a card game. If you have boards, dice, all that kind of stuff, you can get that in there pretty quickly. So yeah, if you just go into the Tabletop Simulator wherever it's installed, they've got like a modding directory. There's a jar here, and it's like pretty bare bones. Again, another Java application. So pretty easy to use. Like you just go and select your files. One thing to note is Tabletop Simulator does have like a 70 card limit for each one of these decks, but you can just chain multiple decks together and put them together. So I think that was just something to be aware of, like why, like in the video, only selected 70 of the 71 cards. But yeah, and then it's really just about like, exporting it, like, creating the deck, exporting it. That's really all you need to do. And so what this does is, you can see there, it created that like sheet file. So it just creates a JPEG that you can take into Tabletop Simulator. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So this one, like super straightforward. You just open up a game, it gives you a table. You navigate over to the objects. You go to cards, pick custom deck. Then if you like right click on that, it gives you the opportunity to pick your sheet. Then you can like pick a back for this. And just look like a JPEG. I'm sure there's lots of like easy to find backs for cards. And then like just make sure the number of cards matches like what you had set in the sheet, right? But then your deck is here in Tabletop Simulator. So all the cards that we had templated. So it's like super quick, super easy to get into this platform. And I played a little bit around with Tabletopia, and it's also like pretty simple to just like take a directory of card faces and like pick a back for them. Very similar tool. That one is more browser based. There might be some other limitations. I'm not super familiar with Tabletopia, so this example I put on like the workshop for Tabletop Simulator. So if you want to see it in action, just search for GNU in Tabletop Simulator. So go check it out. That's it. So for the rest of the talk, just gonna go over some other examples of like, just to give you some ideas of like what these tools are capable of. But at this point, you know everything you need to know to start building awesome tools. So so I had like another game that like after I'd gone through the GNU example, like built up, and here I had like a few different types of cards, and that need to convey different information. Some left had like a roll card, and then this being like another like set collection game with some like social deduction elements to it. Everybody has like a different role and teams and all that. So this one's also on GitHub if you want like a little bit more variety in the examples, but again, like still very text-based. And one of the things I really liked about this, since I knew this was the tool that I was going to use, I was really able to like represent the game ahead of time, like like in a sheet, and like keep track of like how many of each type of card am I going to introduce, like how much of the deck is that going to be, how many cards should I have in total, right? So sort of tailored it for the group that I was building the game for, in terms of like card counts. But it like, when I did play test this game, it sort of worked as I envisioned it, right? And sort of took this approach, like going into it, where I was able to organize my thoughts. So so something that I really like about this approach is that like you're able to think about it very proactively, like in this sort of data-driven way. And then like the other like more quickie example here is like playing like Dungeons and Dragons with my coworkers. We're using like the Eberron content. Like there's a lot for my Warforged Barbarian to remember, and like wasn't seeing that like it fit really well into the character sheet. So like since I was already familiar with this tool, I'm like, hey, like what if I had something that was a bit more composable? So so like lots of things you could use this for. It's not just for making new games. Like maybe there's other ideas there. And then of course the tools themselves come with lots of examples, and like as you can see, like hey, lots of variety here, lots of clever stuff. So definitely go check those out. To get some inspiration. We're like, oh, here's like an example that has a lot more images and stuff. So but yeah, and then I didn't make these tools. So Tom there from France developed that HCCD tool. And then MC DeMarco, who's in giving this talk, did a little bit of research and is a Boston local and science fiction author. So like, there's a tremendous community here. So yeah, like big thanks to them for putting these tools out there. Yeah, like I found them super helpful. Yeah, and just to note, like limitations here, for me, like I found this really helpful for prototype and play testing, right? When there is a lot of ambiguity into what cards you should have, like the design of the cards themselves. My guess is, again, not super expert here since I haven't published any games, but from what I've been reading, like a lot of times you have to use like more traditional tools, your Photoshops, InDesigns, whatever the printer needs. So, so this, but who knows? Maybe you can get away with, PNGs or JPEGs that these tools can produce. So, yeah. But yeah, and then, but that's it. That's the talk, and I know we're getting close to time. So yeah, so hopefully you guys think this is a useful tool. I know I did. Or at least you're mildly entertained by how many lasagna games that I've made. But yeah, and even if like, this tool is not for you, maybe you don't have the need to build a lot of cards, like hopefully some of these like principles apply, right? So thinking about like how you can build your assets for your games in a way that's optimized for change, right? And so in this case, decoupling your formatting from your content can help with that, but I'm sure there's lots of other techniques for doing that. But yeah, but that's all I have for you. Yeah, if you use this tool, let me know about it. Come find me somewhere, like Turtleverse on most platforms. I'm in the BFIG Discord. If you use this and want to put it up on GitHub, like tag me in a pull request. On my GitHub, I've got the Ganugo and the Lasagna Ristorante example. So feel free to grab those, use them, extend them. Yeah, and then I've got link to these slides at the bottom. So yeah, check it out. Yeah, and I know running close to time. If anybody has any pressing questions or comments or corrections that they want to get out there, feel free to go up to the podium. Otherwise, I'll be around for the whole day. Yeah, we can sync up. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah. Yeah, great to be able to talk to you all today.